If you have sung in a high school or community theater production, or even gone to one anytime in the last 40 years or so, you are probably familiar with the words of the sermon title, "Plant a radish, get a radish." It's a song from a wonderful little musical called The Fantastics that opened in New York at a way off Broadway theater in 1960, which is, I know, well before many of you were born, even before Tom was born. It ran continuously for 42 years, 17,162 performances at the Sullivan Street Playhouse in Greenwich Village, until it closed early in 2002. Less than 5 years later, it reopened on Broadway and is still playing to packed houses who still go home singing its best-known song, which is Try to Remember. It's a simple story, an old-fashioned love story with all of the usual characters and then some. There's a boy and a girl and a hero and a villain. And then there are two fathers, two gardens, and a wall that separates them. In the second act, one of my favorite songs is sung by the fathers while they're tending their gardens and talking over the wall about the joys and the risks of raising children. And it goes like this. And don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. Plant a radish, get a radish, never any doubt. That's why I like vegetables. You know what they're about. Plant a turnip, get a turnip. Maybe you'll get two. That's why I love vegetables. You know that they'll come through. And it goes on. They're dependable. They're befriendable. They're the best pal a parent's ever known. While with children, it's bewildering. You don't know until the seed is nearly grown just what you've sown. Now, even with an unseasonably cold spring and a rain-drenched early summer, all of you gardeners know that whether you're waiting for the radishes to come up or the sweet peas to come up, once they do, it makes summer in Minnesota worth all of winter in Minnesota. And whether you're planting radishes or sweet peas, you pretty much know that save for the renegade seed in the packet, you can plant radishes and expect to get radishes. You can plant sweet peas and they'll climb right up the fence as sweet peas. This garden called the church, this garden that we're tending, is never that predictable, and there's no surprise there. Sometimes you think you're planting radishes and you get carrots. Now, if you like carrots, that's great, but if not, it can feel like wasted effort. Interim pastors are used to planting radishes and getting carrots, and we usually don't mind at all. I'm a person who thinks, for example, that one of the best things about raising children, unlike vegetables, is the unpredictability of it all. And there's another line in the song that goes, "Every turnip green, every kidney bean, every plant grows according to the plot. But with progeny, it's hodgepodgeny. For as soon as you think you know what kind you've got, it's what they're not." Now, all churches are different. But what about those cranky folks at the church in Corinth that Paul was writing to? What kind of seeds were they growing? You'll remember that the Corinthian church was not without its share of challenges, and you know that's just a more polite way of saying they bickered about just about everything. Paul had already spent a long time in Corinth establishing the church, about a year and a half, according to the story in Acts, about the length of an interim pastorate. He left Corinth and traveled throughout the region in a ministry of evangelism, strengthening all of the disciples, we are told, finally coming back to Ephesus, where he heard about the problems in Corinth. Crossing paths with Paul was a man named Apollos, a Jew from Alexandria, who is described in Acts as an eloquent man, well-versed in the scriptures. We are told that he had been instructed in the way of the Lord, that he spoke with burning enthusiasm and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus. Apollos first came to Ephesus, where he was mentored by Priscilla and Aquila, and then he went to Corinth, where he was warmly received by the growing community of believers in that city. It seems that some of the conflict in Corinth was centered on the various factions that were emerging, each one allying itself with a different leader, including both Paul and Apollos, as well as Peter. Paul relentlessly reminds them in this epistle that the church, the gathered community of believers, belongs to God. The leaders are merely servants of God's larger purpose. It is foolish, then, even destructive and dangerous to choose sides. And Paul poses the question, what then is Apollos? What is Paul? As Paul develops the image, they are field hands, given the chores of planting and cultivating, each one simply doing the task assigned by God. The one who plants and the one who waters are two sides of the same coin. Without the one who plants, there would be no crop to water. Without the one who tends the garden, the crop would die. They may finally be limited in their usefulness, but they are both important. It's a growing process. Gardening is hard work. Some of us are better gardeners than others. I think about the frog and toad story of Frog planting his garden, wondering why the seeds haven't sprouted, and then shouting at them, and then apologizing for shouting at them, and singing to them, and reading to them, and finally falling asleep exhausted from the effort, only to waken and see that in due time God has indeed given the growth. We have spent the last couple of years together planting and watering and fertilizing and weeding. Interim ministry is a time to turn the ground over, to dig deep into the soil of a congregation's history, and remember what it is about this congregation that makes it faithful and loving and joyful, that makes it the place that you want to call home. And as painful as it can be, it's also a time to throw some things into the compost pile, where they can become part of a more productive life cycle. Now that we've come to the end of our time together, and we are already looking ahead to the next one, maybe it would be good to think about what's been planted and where we see signs of new life in this garden that we call McAllister Plymouth. When you're in the middle of it, it's easy to get discouraged. Sometimes we focus so much on what hasn't come up, what hasn't been done, or how the weeds are taking over, we lose sight of all the new growth, all the beauty that is blooming around us. As much as I love what I do, I have to admit that there have been times in every church, including this one, when I have found myself wondering why I haven't been able to move something forward or resolve some issue that's gotten weedy and thorny and overgrown. Last grandchild story here. Every year when we set out the Christmas decorations, we set up what has become one of the finest and possibly the tackiest collection of battery-powered Christmas toys in the world. From the Santa Claus who does the electric slide, to the Chihuahua who sings, to the dancing poinsettias, all courtesy of Derek's annual 5 o'clock Christmas Eve trip to Walgreens. I usually put the dancing poinsettias in the guest bathroom, since they operate on a motion sensor. And having Brenda Lee break into rocking around the Christmas tree when you close the door is always a nice little Christmas surprise. Anyway, when Christmas is over, the dancing poinsettias are replaced by a rather benign little bouquet of silk flowers that neither sing nor dance. The other day, granddaughter number 3, Addie, came out of the bathroom and said, "Grandma, I just can't motivate those flowers to dance." And I thought, yep, I know just what you mean. I can't get them to dance sometimes either. But it's about more than a bunch of dancing flowers, of course, so I wanted to take a quick walk through the garden and give thanks for what's blooming. And we'll start right up here on the chancel. This church has an extraordinary music and worship program, thanks to a very gifted music staff, to the members of the chancel choir, the youth choir, the children's choir, the handbells, summer soloists, all of whom bring much joy to our worship services and give glory to God. And maybe you've been thinking about trying something new, so just remember that all God's critters got a place in the choir, and there's a place for you. Our hymn writing contest is now in its 17th year, and it just keeps getting better. It's been my honor to be one of the judges for the past 2 years. I'm amazed at the quality of the hymns that are submitted. So with your loving care, what started out as a very small corner of the garden is in full bloom, and you'll want to keep watering that one. Education and fellowship continue to thrive. Our children's education program is growing. On good days, we can have as many as 15 to 20 children up here on the chancel steps. We have one of the best youth ministries in either of our denominations, and our mission trips are legendary, and in a good way. Adult education is branching out a bit. We now have 3 ongoing Bible studies. I'm hopeful that it won't be long before we have a 3rd adult education track on Sunday mornings, in addition to the topical forums and the Bible study. Our all-church fellowship events have been full to overflowing. There aren't enough places to put people who want to be part of the round-the-table carol sing or the all-church retreat. Sunday morning coffee hour is always a lively gathering, even when we don't have treats, or even when we don't have coffee. New garden plots have been planted as well. The men's retreat, which certainly came with no guarantees, turned out to be a huge success and resulted in the ongoing monthly men's breakfast. A women's breakfast group will gather for the first time next month. Mission and outreach has always been a hallmark of this congregation, and we continue to make it a priority, both with our financial support and our volunteer hours. Food shelf donations, Project Home, loaves and fishes are just a small part of how we care for our neighbors. Caring for Creation, the Peacemakers, the Marriage Equality Group have all taken us into new areas of mission and ministry and have planted seeds that continue to blossom in ways that we might not have imagined when we put them in the ground. We continue to maintain and care for this aging building, and unless you've been on the operations committee, you have no idea what a big job that is. Because we value our mission to the community, the building gets a lot of use, from the preschool to the outside groups that meet here on a regular basis to our own groups and committees. And we continue to care for each other. The deacons have instituted several new programs and projects this year, all of which have been received enthusiastically by those who have benefited from their loving care and attention. A lot goes on behind the scenes that you probably never know about. The Finance and Stewardship and the Personnel Committees have labored long and hard to put procedures and policies in place to ensure that our finances are in good order and our staff is in good spirits. And I hope you know what a wonderful staff you have here at McAllister Plymouth. Not everything is coming up roses, of course. We're still going to have our share of financial challenges for a while longer. God willing, we will turn it around and not reach the point of having to lay off staff, which, along with the building, is the largest portion of the annual budget. Stewardship is going to take a little more time and attention, a little more watering and fertilizing before we see much new growth. But think about how much hope there is in a seed. And with every gift, another seed is planted for the future of this church. Good gardeners know the secrets of a healthy garden, and all of them can easily be applied to the church. The first one is that you have to start with good soil, and that means you have to work the soil and turn it over and break up the clumps of hard dirt to let the air and the water and the nourishment and filter through to it. You have to spend a lot of time weeding, and that's not always a lot of fun, especially when some of the weeds have such pretty flowers. And sometime in the spring, you have to plant your heart in the garden. And the best way to do all of that is on your knees with your hands in the dirt. And above all, when the unexpected happens, when the cucumbers climb the lilac tree and what you thought were daffodils turn out to be onions, and those onions just won't dance, don't be discouraged. Receive it all with joy. Pay attention to Paul's words. We can plant and we can water, but only God gives the growth. We have to trust that God is in the new growth of this congregation and be open to surprise. You can still plant radishes and expect to get radishes, but sometimes the grace is in the hodgepodgeny of it all, if you're able to rejoice in it. Thanks be to God. Amen.